We are here to take on the American dream. The idea of the American dream predates the founding of our nation. Its complex trajectory illuminates the contradiction, tension, and potential contained within our individual and collective dreams and experiences. In celebration of the life, legacy, and vision of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we have brought together outstanding community leaders from across our region to explore the unique relationship to the American dream, sharing their understandings of its relevance to our broader community and challenging us to reconsider what it means to be American as we reach the quarter mark of the 21st century.
It's so amazing to be a Native person in this community right now. There is not a better community, I don't think, in all of the country that is so supportive to Native community. And the reality is that in the Native community, we have suffered at the hands of colonization and cities. And so that's a little bit of my presentation that I want to share with you all tonight and talk a little bit about my own perspectives of the way that internalized racism has impacted me, has impacted my family, and impacts all of us when we think about the way that we live in this world and the way that we interact with each other and interact with Indigenous people and community. So here I am at 18 years old, graduating from high school, and at that time, my dreams centered around having the concept of good hair that was light and fluffy, good hair that didn't take 3 hair ties to tie it into a good ponytail, good hair that settled down politely and without protest, good hair that was essentially white hair, and not just white hair, but white girl hair. You see, my sense of self was tainted by imposed, internalized racism, that my long and unruly Native hair wasn't good enough, and that I wasn't good enough. And this may sound crazy, but there is a good reason for that. I remember my sisters and I talking all the time about what would it take for us to get to that good white girl hair. We must remember, and we must think about it now, that we live in a post-genocidal era. The genocide of millions and millions of Native people whose dreams were rich and vibrant and alive. And when we think tonight about the American dream, we have to remember that. We have to remember the loss of so many people's dreams. My relatives, my people, my ancestors, our babies were victims of colonization. And yet, they were strong and resilient. They fought and they fought and they fought. And despite what occurred, I, Sandra, Kimberly, we are the living manifestation of their dreams, because we should not be here tonight speaking in front of you. We cannot begin a night like tonight without remembering their dreams and their lives. Because in fact, our lives and our destinies, the successes of this country, were built on the slaughter of Native lives. This country, our cities were built hand to mortar, hammer to wood, by brown men and brown women. Cities and towns built on stolen land, built without thought or consideration to the dreams and the plans of the people of the land, the Native people, the first people, my relatives. And now I live in one of these cities, this beautiful city of Seattle, which I love and adore. Been here for 20 years, named after a great chief of the Suquamish and Duwamish nations. I'm a citizen of the Pawnee Nation, but yet I live here. I reconcile every day. What does that mean? How do I honor and respect the Coast Salish people? I am now the dreamer of the dreams that my ancestors had hoped and dreamed for. But what does that mean when I see this picture of Princess Angeline, who was a victim of the 1865 ordinance of the city of Seattle that said Native people were not allowed inside this very city? Let me say that again, that Native people were not allowed inside the city limits of the city of Seattle in 1865, and Princess Angeline stayed. And we see pictures like this around our city in Pioneer Square that declare dominance, that declare white supremacy, that declare colonization, that say we are going to eradicate the Native people, the Native community. We must remember that we are here on Native land. And I wonder about the impact of colonized spaces throughout the city and country that continue to declare that white supremacy is won. We all must remember that cities, for the large part, were designed to keep Native people out. We're designed to keep people of color out. That we're only good for the cooking and cleaning, the menial task. And we're faced with things like this where white supremacy is built into a mountain to declare to all of the Native people that we won. And how do we reconcile that within a city, in an urban space like Seattle? I am so fortunate now to work in an organization that is focused on the needs of urban Native people, the Chief Seattle Club. We are working every single day to remember that Native people are here, we are vibrant, we are leading, but we are also remembering our babies. This is a beautiful picture of my daughter dancing at a powwow here in Seattle. And every time she puts her foot down on this ground, it's a reminder to this community, to all of us, that we are still here despite the attempts to erase us. And that is, and it's important to remember that even in this city, that 11% of our Native babies that are born here have risk of death. That when I had my baby here, I remembered the statistic, 11% mortality rate. That is unbelievable. We also remember that our Native community here are 7 times more likely to be homeless. This is a national problem where Native people are more likely to be homeless than anyone else in this country. To me, that is morally repugnant. And what do I do as a Native community member here? What do we all do as caring citizens in this country? We build, and we remember that indigenous community and indigenous art and design is here. This is my new project in Pioneer Square that I'm so excited about. I'll invite you all. There's not 80 units of housing are going to be in this housing project. And we're going to build, and we're going to build, and we're going to remember that Native leadership is here. I dream of Native people and Native women. I dream and I remember that Native women and Native leadership has always been powerful and strong, but now we see it visibly. We have 2 brilliant Native women in Congress. And let me tell you something about these Native women. Their hair is long and brown and Native as hell. So I want to say to all of you, and I want to say to all of the Beckys out there, I have a message for you. Becky and every single one of us out there with the so-called good hair, the real American dream is strong, it is wiry, it is resilient, it is indigenous, and it is female. And despite your attempts to erase us, we have remained, and we continue to remain, and we'll lead with solutions that are based in love, in justice, and yes, incredibly beautiful Native hair.
My name is Yousef Penor. I was born here in the United States. My dream started off when my dad, as you can see him up there, immigrated to the United States at the same age that I am right now. He came here on this ideology that he was going to come here, build his dream. It didn't get quite there, but he built the foundation for me to build my own dream. So, my dream started when 9/11 happened. My beautiful mama, who's in the audience right now, she was reminded how ugly she was because she wore the hijab. My dad, who was a professor, even though he was teaching the community, doing the best that he can do, was told to go back to his country, even though the only country he known was the United States. So because of that fear, they decided to take us back to their parents' native country, which is Algeria. I had no idea where Algeria was, what it was, so just went with it. That's a picture of me and my cousins at the age of 5.5. So when I went to Algeria, my language that I spoke was English because I was born here. In Algeria, I had to relearn Arabic, had to relearn French, had to adjust to the culture shift. And I was bullied, I was called names because I didn't speak Arabic. That was my first grade pictures, as you can see, a lonely kid. So by the age of 10, I excelled in school, did the best I can do, and I picked up Arabic. I was ranked as one of the top students. I was in the top 1% of my class. And I was, my teachers looked at me and they said, you should go into nationals and, go there and show them your skills. So, but then it all took a turn when I was, about 13. I saw my family were struggling. They couldn't find a job because, Algeria is corrupted. It's all about who you know. So I tried to take it into my own hands, tried to go into the bad direction, had bad friends, drugs, vegetables, selling vegetables, stealing phones. And that's, as you can see, I wasn't happy. And then my parents, crazy parents, changed their decision again because of school strikes. They're both professors, teachers. They changed their decision and decided to come back to the United States. So, coming to America. I remember the first time when I came back here to the United States, it was really cold. And it wasn't because the weather was cold, it was because of the community. I remember we didn't have a roof. We didn't have nowhere to go, and we didn't have a roof on our head, so we were homeless for 3 months. We struggled for 3 months. During that time, my dad had diabetes. He developed diabetes, developed high blood pressure, the stress coming here as an immigrant. But then God sent us a guardian angel, and he helped us get a house in Federal Way. And that's where I met my good friend Wale. So going to Federal Way High School. Federal Way High School was an amazing school, but for me, I didn't speak English. So I didn't know, what classes I was gonna go in. So I had to test myself, had to do really good at the test and all that good stuff. But took the test, did really good. I met some amazing friends, so I wasn't lonely in my freshman year here. Yeah. And from no English speaking to keep calm and getting a 4.0 GPA, that opened up the door for me to take the state test and pass it on my first attempt. And that even opened up the door for me to, take Cambridge classes, which are honor classes, really hard classes. Excelling academically is good and everything, but you want to give back. And I saw, for me, my chance was to give back to the ELL language speakers, to the Muslim community. So that one picture is when I ended up helping pass the seal of biliteracy, which helps dual citizens or second language speakers such as myself take credits for the classes, for the languages they speak. So graduated from Federal Way High School with honors. Got a lot of scholarship, and thankfully there were a lot of teachers that adopted me, helped me out, and got me through all of the system of going to college, and ended up going to UW-Tacoma. UW-Tacoma, first quarter is the same thing, doing really good academically, and getting involved in the community by going and being part of the Service and Activities Fee Committee, and being nominated named as the Outstanding Student Leader of the Year of 2016. That was a big deal. Now, and this is where really helped me, was getting into the School of Engineering and Technology, getting one of the top internships here in Seattle at the VC, a really well-known VC, and going to San Francisco and presenting some of my findings on technology. But then we nominated a good president, I guess. And that kind of influenced on me giving back to the community and joining the World Affairs Council as his youngest member, being part of the Muslim Student Association on campus, and meeting with nominee for president, and trying to make as much influence as I can. And that's a picture of me graduating from college, still representing my Algeria, my roots still live with me, and getting a job offer. What I'm doing now, what I'm up to, traveling, trying to volunteer as much as possible, and spreading the goodwill that I received from being here. So my last slide is, does the American dream lives? I think it does, but I think it's impossible for immigrants. I've seen it in myself as a Muslim, as non-English speaker. It's really hard to receive the resources and and everything that's going on. So does it live? I think we are all part of it.
So my name is Monserrat Padilla. I am undocumented and unafraid, transgender and unashamed. I am the coordinator of a powerful network of over 150 organizations that are working to build a defense line for immigrant and refugee communities today. This is a little bit about my dream. So I close my eyes and I hear a knock at the door. It is ICE. Open the door. I ask for a warrant, but before the warrant is given to me, I see a back door and I run through that back door. I go ask for my neighbor for sanctuary and he rejects me. But by the fourth rejection that I face, I start feeling alone and desperate. When I wake up, I realize that our reality is not any far away from that nightmare that I had. Just last fall in Bellingham, over 25 immigrant workers were raided on their way to work. And just recently, folks in Basin City, in a community in Tri-Cities who were working in farms, were also taken from their way to work. Now I ask myself, is this the American dream that we all want? As many of us come into this country, we face very dangerous conditions. Many of us are forced into going onto boats and fleeing the violence, thanks to fleeing the violence of, we're fleeing the violence that we're coming from our country from. But, you know, I think that many of our lives are put at risk when we do this. And I ask myself again, is this worth the American dream? Now we see the news of new administrations, but the reality is that this has not changed. As said before, on 9/11, many of us woke up to the horrific news of a terrorist attack. And then our people's hunt began. Unfortunately, here in Washington State, not much has changed in the last decade. Washington State continues to collaborate with Immigration Custom Enforcement, aiding to the deportation pipeline of our communities. And we don't see strong leadership. But we have the opportunity to change that today. This year, we have the opportunity to end collaboration with Immigration Custom Enforcement. So when I say abolish ICE, you repeat after me, abolish ICE. Abolish ICE.
Abolish ICE.
Abolish ICE.
Abolish ICE.
It is important that we hold the line and hold our principles and tie ourselves to our community. When we say not one more, we mean it. To this day, local counties and cities continue to collaborate with Immigration Custom Enforcement. Just up north in Snohomish, when anybody ends up in the juvenile detention centers, ICE is called immediately. And just last year, the Department of License gave massive information of all of our communities, and today ICE has plate readers for our communities to deport us. So, and just in our county, just going down south on I-5, we can see Boeing Airfield Airport, where that's the #1 place where people get deported into other countries. How can we stand with this? How can we allow for our leadership to continue deporting our families? But the reality is that this has been rooted on a further rhetoric of criminalization to our communities. As a dreamer and a 4.0 student, I have added to this rhetoric of who is deserving and who is not. Are we willing to throw criminals away? Now I ask myself, is it worth for me? I haven't seen my mom for over 10 years. The last time I saw her was over a fence. Now I know that many families suffer this same pain every single day. 2 weeks ago, my aunt passed away. And all I can think of, is it worth it? Since the Trump administration has come on board, 22 deaths have been found in immigration detention center. Claudia Flores was a child who was playing at the border and was shot by Custom Border Patrol. The 2 immigrant children who just died recently in the holidays due to medical malpractice are in our hands. Their blood is in our hands. But I know that even though the journey was tough, and even though the conditions here are horrific, it continues to be home, and it continues to be a safer place than we were at before. I say that because when I talk to my community, I see the resiliency. I see that people can be who they are, and I can be who I've always known to be. A transgender woman who lives unapologetically. Business people are working every day, regardless of their city council members, and CTAC are working to kick them out from their homes and their businesses. And farm workers are working every day knowing that at any day ICE can come and strike. And some of us just stand fabulously right there. But yeah, this was a picture that was taken shortly after the DACA was rescinded, and I was ready, my makeup was on point, and I was ready to hold the line for our community. One thing that I've learned in this journey is that our bodies is our power. That's all we have as immigrant and refugee communities. It is our bodies, and we must learn to use them to build power for each other and stand in solidarity. As we see, immigrant youth have not shied down away from the fight when Trump has come after us. In this picture, you see me tackling the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, the person that has the most militarized power in this country, and I held him accountable. So I'm not telling you to do something I have never done before. I'm telling you to stand with me in this fight. Here we are holding Senator Reid, a Democrat, accountable for his actions to continue deporting communities. The future is beautiful. The present, as I'm doing this work, is beautiful because I'm seeing LGBTQ communities, faith communities, indigenous communities, Muslim communities, immigrant communities, allied communities, all working together to build a united front, and we must continue to hold each other's back. But remember, we can't do this with a broken heart. We need to heal ourselves, and we need to transform, use this pain, this courage, these emotions that we have to transform not only ourselves, but our community. And again, I think that in this journey, as you've seen myself, this journey has transformed me, and I hope that it's able to transform my community.
I am so honored to stand here, and I've been so touched by everyone who's spoken before me. You guys are so brave. You guys are really courageous, and in sharing your stories, you are enlightening so many people and allowing us to take a stand. So as mentioned, my name is Karen Okunkwo, and I'm first-generation Nigerian American. And one of my biggest, deepest desires was to really share with you what I feel I am doing to live out the American dream. So first things first is a saying that is very important to me, and that is representation matters. And that became very clear to me in 2016 when two unfortunate killings happened in the Black community, and that was against Philando Castile and Alton Sterling. And it was in that time that many stories were shared of these people, and they were false. And so I thought, why not start a series, why not start a stock photography business so that I can take charge and I can take back the stories and share of so many different beautiful people. And so this is an exhibit here of some of the work from Tonal. So one of the stories that I want to talk about is Black fatherhood. There are a lot of stereotypes that are connected to Black fatherhood, one of which is that Black fathers are not present. And so what we decided to do is we decided to create a narrative story surrounding people and their beautiful stories, specifically Black fatherhood with Brandon. So Brandon is the single father of a beautiful son named Christian, and he is very present in his child's life. He's a full-time dad, he's committed to his work, and he's committed to negating the stereotypes that Black men are not in their fathers' lives. And so his beautiful story just enlightens all of us to know that Black men are very much present. Next here is empowering Asian women. So I had the pleasure of meeting with Sharon Lynn, who is a co-founder of Arise Seattle. And when Sharon approached me, she said that she hated that there were so many stereotypes of Asian women specifically, that they were timid, that they often didn't take on major roles in corporate America. And so we decided, let's sit together and let's share the story about Arise Seattle. Let's empower women and show them in the Asian community that there's so much more than being quiet and being timid. So we gathered together around a meal and learned about their individual stories. And it was really an exciting time for us to hear them speak and talk and encourage their community. Next here is more than just albino. So we met with a woman named Nodumo, who is from Mozambique. And one of the fears that she had growing up was not being accepted as a Black albino person. And to show her beauty and to give her confidence, we said, let's take a camera, let's take a picture of you and share with people your story, all the things that you've had to overcome, not only battling being albino, but also connecting with the Black community. And so her biggest fear is that other albino people will not be accepted in this world. Next here is Love with No Limits. And for us, we hear the saying, love is love is love. And we couldn't agree more. And so we decided to connect with our two friends, Stefan and Luke, to share their story about how they met. Because not only did they meet under different conditions, one of them being white, the other being black, but they also met in knowing that society has not accepted them. And while we did this shoot, they had to endure jeers, they had to endure dirty looks. And the goal in us sharing their story is to say that love comes in all shapes and all forms. We exist. This was so near and dear to us. This was one of the first narratives that we did. And we connected with Abigail Echohawk to share the American Indian and Alaska Native community, a community that has been underserved and has been misrepresented. And when we sat with Abigail, her goal was to create the first set of stock images to show her people in their true light. Not all of the negative stereotypes that are associated with this community, but the beautiful culture, from their food to their clothing to their beautiful rituals that we saw here earlier. And so we, again, decided to gather to share the story of how beautiful they are and the thousands of years that they've been here on this earth. I Will Walk Again. So I Will Walk Again is a narrative of a young gentleman named Marcel who unfortunately was at the wrong place at the wrong time. A friend of his at the time got into an altercation with him and shot him, of which he had a complete C4 injury, paralyzed from the neck down. And one of the things that compelled me was that he still was so embracing of being a father and trying to live out life normally. But if there's anything that stood out, is he said that guns destroy not only the lives of those people, but the families in their communities. And so it was really important to get the word out on that, gun violence. Tonal and Chromebook. So we were fortunate to gather with Google, who saw that it was important to create more diversity in technology. A lot of different ethnic groups are actually one of the highest consumers in technology, but there was no imagery out there for them. So we connected with Chromebook to create a storyline of 10 different people, one of which here you see is Mektis, who's a first-generation Ethiopian American, and she is both a model for Glossier and a research coordinator. And the whole point was to show millennials who are managing different roles and using technology all in the same front. And so lastly, I just want to say that, photography is beautiful and it comes in all types of representation, and the storytelling is the most important part. Storytelling is what allows people to become more empathetic, and it opens us more to understanding people and leading with love rather than leading with whatever bias that we have. And so I encourage you to share your stories, and of course, please follow us, Tonal, TONL.co.
The American dream. What is the American dream? And do we all have the same American dream? Do we all have the same opportunity? The founders of this country love to talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what about the people that were here before us? Do they not have a dream? One thing we can count on in America, though, is we can dream of incarceration. We're a small country with 5% of the world's population, yet we incarcerate 1 out of 4 people in the entire world in our prisons. Just think about that. The land of the free and the home of the brave locks up more of its citizens than anybody else on earth. So not only do we have a crazy incarceration problem, and we incarcerate people for a greater number of crimes for a longer amount of time than anybody else on earth, but recidivism really impacts that too. 65% of people come back to prison within 3 years, 79% within 6 years, and 83% within 9 years. They all come back to prison because they have no programs to rehabilitate themselves. Once upon a time, education was effective at rehabilitation, but Congress took that away back in '94 during the war on drugs. They figured that being tough on criminals was being the same thing as being tough on crime. So they took away all funding for rehabilitation programs. And so why does that matter? Well, I guess let me talk about my personal journey. I was incarcerated for a while, but I was really lucky. Oh, let me back up, I missed that slide. So the reason it matters is $1 invested in correctional education really benefits society. The Rand Corporation discovered that $1 returns 45 back to society. Washington State Institute for Public Policy pegs that number about $20 in public value. And this comes back to my story. So while the education programs did not exist, I was lucky because I had a father that could pay for it. So when I was incarcerated, I graduated the top of my class at Penn State, upper 1/2%. I did really well, only because I had that opportunity to do so. And I discovered a lot of people just like myself would do the same thing. Of course, when I got out, I went to the UW in a nonprofit management program. Go Huskies. And of course, I ended up at Stanford. So if you can imagine, maybe after 15 years in prison, you find yourself at Stanford. That's a pretty crazy dream that happened because I had the opportunity to do so. There's lots of people in prison just like myself, just like Tracy Matheson. She was one of the first people we funded back in 2007. She got her degree, her associate's degree. She got out, went through to UW Tacoma, and she graduated just this year, or last year. And then we have Chemo Stone. We helped him get his degree. Along that journey, he was a Hawaiian prisoner, and he discovered that they unjustly sentenced him as a juvenile to life in prison. He got out after 20 years, which is just a couple of years ago. He started Hawaiian labor contracting, where he hires returning citizens to do construction work. And Robert Wood, we helped him get his degree, and he is such an outstanding person. He's on our board of directors, he's our senior social media advisor, and right now he's pursuing his MBA from a federal prison. So if you think about prison sucks, there's nothing you can do, but imagine if you could spend your time getting an MBA, changing your life. He has a very different dream than a lot of people could. And why does it matter? Why should we even help these people? The reason is because 95% of all prisoners come back to America, or come back to society. So the question is, who do you want your neighbors to be, and what kind of community you want to build when people come back home? It also might matter in how we define community. Is it a gated community? Is it a city? Is it a state? Is it our nation, or the world? Because how we define a community is how we define people, and whether we want to help those people or not. So Kurt, why don't you tell us about your fight for the American dream?
Yo, 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 my mind's like fight night, minus all the cheers and them bright lights. Plus I'm blinded by the tears in my eyesight. Cold world nipping at my ear, Mike Tice, but no punch out. You can't fold me. Your boys coming out swinging for the nosebleeds. Float like a butterfly, sting them like they owe me. Only thing standing in my way is the old me. If I ever fall down to the bottom, then a sunken treasure is going down too. Cause my mind's worth more than its weight in gold. And that's a pearl of wisdom, call it the crown jewel. In mine, call it the sound booth. That's where the universe communicates its sound through. And the music it creates can make the clouds move. Towers crumble, flowers bloom. And even though that's all true, there's still something that can make it all fall through. So it's me against myself now. I got a fighting chance, I call it round 2. No matter which way I choose, I'm bound to get a scrape or bruise. But I cannot be afraid to lose or be ashamed to see my dreams come true. True, 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 it's what I'm fighting for. My string brother.
I want to start by acknowledging that as an African American, I know I am an unexpected guest on indigenous land. And my vision of the American dream is one where we always acknowledge the primacy and centrality of indigeneity. But I'm starting with Lucille Clifton because of the ways that she thinks about being and the way she thinks about cosmologies. 10 years ago, I worked at the Seattle Art Museum and they were working on a co-sailor show called Sabato. And recently, I'm seeing Asia in the audience, I got a chance to work on a project called Yahout. Yahout helped me really think about the ways that indigenous knowledge is so needed right now. The image we're seeing is of the mother who was mourning the death of her calf this past summer. And it made me think about all the ways that Indigenous people have taken up things and problems to solve that they did not create. And that connects with some of the ways that I see the world. We're looking at my friend Aaron and Faisal. Aaron and Faisal are part of a group called Creative Justice, and when I took this portrait of them, we did it at Seward Park, and Faisal looked at the bird and said, "She's in a box that looks just like a prison cell." I love that creative justice exists because it helps us think of a world without prisons. I've worked on a number of different Pecha Kuchas with Anna, and typically they've been heartbreaking. We've done them after the death of Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin. We've done them to talk about interrupting whiteness. We've done them over and over again because of the way our society is set up. That changes this summer, though. I'm not going to read that slide, but I think it's a humorous thing about something that's not funny, which is how xenophobic and anti-immigrant America is, and probably has always been, but particularly for people of color. So as we see attacks on families from Central and Latin America, I think of my own family. This is my mom's, the oldest picture we have of my mom's family. I come from the Weaver clan. We've lived in Arkansas for about 150 years. This is a picture of my great-great-grandfather, Ransom Weaver. And he was able to set up a whole community. So my mom went to the Weaver School and the Weaver General Store. My dad came from a family of mixed race people that were also from Arkansas. And one of the things that I learned from my dad is that the colorism in his family, he's about Marvin Gaye colored, and he was considered too dark for his family. And he taught me that I was beautiful because I'm Black. I have a kind of a corny joke that I'm gonna make, a comedy called Come In. And it won't be, that's a still from Get Out, of course. But in my comedy, Come In, we would talk about all the ways that Blackness informs American culture. And I would encourage people by watching it to not sit at the table of Black culture just with their appetites. I believe in trauma-informed care, and as we look at the after effects of people who have trauma that has not healed, I think thinking about the fact that R. Kelly is staying in Trump Tower while we look at an unfolding list of things about our president, that we can imagine a world where we get free. If you're wondering where this image has come from, it's Diana Ross in the Black version of The Wizard of Oz, better known as The Wiz. And I always think of those Alvin Ailey dancers dressed in gold when I'm a little bit too stuck with the ugliness of the world, and remember that it's radical imagination. When I opened talking about indigeneity, one thing that struck me, I did a social practice project where we were skywriting Black Lives Matter over the Space Needle. So this picture is from my friend Michael B. Main. He's actually gonna do a workshop with us with youth from Clear Sky tomorrow. And I'm excited about that. This is Sojourner Truth, and we should just love her because she's amazing. But to finish that thought, thinking about the ways that Indigenous people and African Americans can spend some time thinking about the ways that we can heal. We lost about 30 million lives between the Indigenous genocide and the Black transatlantic slave trades. So when I see what's happening with immigrants, I say not one more. But also in thinking about indigeneity, it's led me back to my own gods. This is an image of Yimiya. If you like mermaids, you might be curious to find out that some of the first mermaids were Black. Yimiya and Oshun are from the Yoruba religion. So spending time thinking about past and present, in our present, I have to say watching Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez ask, "Where's Mitch?" and see the leadership from Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids, and the fact that we have 37 women of color joining Congress, that's a first. And it's our civic leadership that's necessary, but also let's think about our grassroots. This is Fulgencio Lazo, also known as Ful. I love him. When I worked here at SAM, we would always do tapetes for Day of the Dead, but he also works really hard to do cultural preservation. The power of art to help us transform stuck ideas. I do not agree with the neoliberal politics of the Obamas, but when we saw Michelle Obama loving and nurturing Black children and telling them that they matter, that is so transformative. And I want to live in this country and one day see an indigenous woman be president. Because the strong, fierce indigenous women that I've met over my time in Seattle have hardened me. I read an article this week that talked about the burning of the longhouses to push people who are part of the Salish Sea, Mischievous people, away from her. And it is our duty, Fabian Romero, an indigenous scholar, was just saying, it is our duty as uninvited guests on indigenous land to uplift what indigenous people are doing. That doesn't mean that I don't focus on the things that matter to me. We're looking at an image that says Black Lives Matter, and you can see I'm centering trans women and queer and trans Black people. That's a broader conversation. I don't bring up our identities to separate us, but to say that we belong so much together, and we have so much work to do. I love you, and thank you.
When thinking about the big American dream, I automatically think of my parents. My mother came here in the United States, and my father also came here in the United States 20 years ago. Before that, they had an education. My father went to school until he was in 10th grade, and my mother went here and had education until she was in 6th grade. And this is us now. And 20 years later, I'm currently an undergrad student majoring in both political science and sociology. And not only am I the first person to graduate high school, but I'm also the first to attend college. And I also have two amazing siblings who are showing a more promising future than my own, all because my family, my parents, came here on the idea of the American dream. Now, stories like mine and my parents are not unique. In today's political arena, we often see, controversy about immigration the same way my parents came. And it's tough out there. Just right now, we got a government shutdown over disagreements and stuff like that. But this brings me to my main point. And today, the United States has ignored so much so the Latino presence that we see today that it doesn't know what to do to the growing Latino presence that we see in America. Being a Chicano, I understand that the United States is as American as it is Mexican. Now, what do I mean by this? According to the US Census, the Latino population is 57.5 million, or 18% of the entire US population. It is projected by 2060 that the Latino population will be 119 million people, or nearly 30% of the whole entire US population. Now, that's a lot of paisas, bro. So, with the growing Latino population, the United States has been trying to figure out ways to make itself more inclusive or make us feel unwanted. Historically speaking, the United States has been, not making good attempts to making us feel included. Once Texas became a state, independent from Mexico in 1836, the United States continued to crave what was northern Mexico, caused the Mexican-American War, and eventually conquered the whole entire Southwest. And both countries, Mexico and the United States, signed a treaty that promised American citizenship, but also promised civic and property rights to Mexicans, but failed to do so. Now, we see treatment like this all throughout American history. The Racero program, first introduced in World War II during a time of immense labor shortage, brought 4 million new Mexicans to the United States, but none of them were granted American citizenship. So they were often exploited by privatized business. So the 20th century was filled with a lot of Latin American issues caused by the United States. We must acknowledge what a century of US-backed military coups, neoliberal sapping of resources, and corporate plundering played a role in the violence and instability that we now see in Latin America. Now, with so many people suffering from excessive imperialism in the 20th century, the United States was in a position of being better economically than any Latin American country. And because of this, we see huge migration from Latin America to the United States, including my parents. Now, according to the Pew Research Center, between 1980 and 2000, the Latino immigrant population went from 4.2 million to 14.1 million, and all of them had the American dream in mind. Now, how did my parents handle this American dream? Well, we kind of defined it early on. My parents came here because they wanted the opportunity that simply just wasn't possible in Mexico. And they just wanted my life to be better than theirs growing up. And growing up, I knew I wanted the American dream, and my parents wanted me to grab it on early on, saying, mijo, enfócate en la escuela, like that's your only job, because according to them and according to society as a whole, getting an education is the only path to getting a good life. And I remember how difficult it was for me to just grasp the idea of the American dream. Spanish is my first language. I didn't know a single word of English until I hit kindergarten. And my Spanish wasn't even good either, like it was pretty ass. But no, but for real though, like I couldn't enunciate perfect words. I mispronounced Spanish like all the time. And eventually I found out that I needed speech classes. And I was put in special education because the school district just didn't know what to do with me. And so in the school district that I was in, there wasn't any English learning programs and or no speech programs. So I spent 2 years just like chilling, you know, like trying to figure out how to like, you know, talk to my teachers and figuring out how to talk to my classmates. But because of that, I had no homies. I was like an outcast, you know, no friends. And with a generation of first, no, think about this on a larger scale. When a generation of first enters the American institutions, they shouldn't be prevented from having the American dream. The United States needs to find means to make the United States feel more inclusive to us Latinos. And we're already kind of seeing this already, you know, with more representation on the big screen to being elected into Congress, but we need an environment where we feel welcome, because that would just better equip us to contribute to society. Now, we are Americans. We can no longer not feel American enough because of our skin color and because, you know, of cultural differences and our language barriers. What makes America great is its intersectionality. And I think it's time for us Latinos in the United States to have received fair treatment and opportunity, provide resources that's inclusive and not force assimilation, but rather appreciate what diverse cultural differences that we can contribute. Now, over the next years, I want the American dream to be more accessible to Latinos. I want to see board meetings, workshops, schools, find ways to engage the growing community that we're going to see in the next couple of years. And 20 years ago, my parents came here because of the American dream. 20 years later, I'm currently pursuing it. And, you know, the future of America is brown, and I'm just proud to be proud of it.
So as mentioned, my name is Troy. I'm a poet. I'm a community organizer with a Filipino youth and student movement called Anak Bayan Seattle, and I'm an attorney. Oh my gosh. Okay, trying to be. And for the next 6 minutes, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the American dream. I'll first walk you through my understanding of what it is, and then I'll end with a poem. So, the American dream is the idea that if you work hard enough, you'll be successful. It promotes the belief that everyone is on an equal playing field. And if you're rich, it's because you worked hard. And if you're poor, it's because you didn't. With that said, the American dream works, but not in the way we think. We are not on an equal playing field. People who work hard aren't always successful, and people who are successful don't always work hard. Rather, the American dream works perfectly as a tool to pit marginalized communities against one another. We should all reject the American dream. Rather than fighting for wealth and opportunity against one another, we should unite and fight against the people in power who are protecting their own wealth by putting us against each other in opposition. The American dream is born out of capitalism and imperialism. We can't talk about the American dream without talking about the countless countries America has stolen land and resources from, thereby destabilizing the economy and forcing people to find work elsewhere, including America. The American dream doesn't serve the interests of the people. It serves the interests of a few in power. And as long as we believe that it can be achieved, we're reinforcing the idea that poor people deserve to be poor, rather than recognizing the conditions America created to ensure marginalized communities don't succeed. I'd like to now share a poem that reimagines the world to be one that doesn't determine a person's worth based on what they produce. I'd like to call for a new world, and I'd like to call for a new dream. This poem is inspired by a group of young folks from Seattle. And it's after Zura, Esther, Shelby, and Zora. Remember when the revolution happened and every border built as a wall was torn down. We burst out laughing, knowing this was how the world was meant to be. Every detention center demolished, and in its place, a really good dance floor. Every mother once separated from her child is now not. We've disarmed the state, strung up their rifles, and made wind chimes of their weapons. Each song sounds like ceasefire, a chorus of checkpoints undoing themselves. Every glorified hall monitor is banished from patrolling any border. Now, the only bullet left is in reverse, and all the corpses with holes come back to us. Now, there is no such thing as immigration reform. The only policies passed are those encouraging every person forced to find work overseas to finally return home. And when they do, they have something to return home to. Foreign corporations have been evicted, and the brightest crops since colonization are blooming. Whole industries are breathing again. No nation occupies another nation. Military bases are sunken lands, and armored cars rust below the ocean. Drones are scraps of unflyable metal, each one reimagined as a spaceship by every child it couldn't kill. Lorena blurts out a brilliant smile. Andres's chest is full of chuckles, and the shiny slide they're racing to the bottom of is made of melted down tanks. Something, not a war, is taking their breath away now. Even the massive hole that once held a mosque before the airstrike holds a mosque again, and the hole next to it, it's a swimming pool. And when the president proposed to build a wall, we bent open his bank vault, poured out his billions, and burned it in an oil drum instead. We built this world to be a better place than he ever could and made him watch. Now, whenever someone says cage or forced removal, what we mean is something no person has ever seen. Ice has become so ancient, it's nearly a myth. Every generation whispers its name softer than the last yesterday. I roamed the North Seattle Library and learned all of what the old world couldn't keep alive. The deportation hearing, the no-fly list, the interrogation room, wherever it is. We've banned all use of black sites and torture because we don't need them anymore. Remember, when the revolution happened, we don't plan on giving it back. So come, try and take this from us. Upstairs is a room full of ashes. Everyone we incinerated to get here is on display, and we've saved enough space in case we ever have to scorch the bones of someone else again. Here, in the new world, we laugh, and this time, we mean it.
My name is Sandra Segundo Cunningham, and I'm from the Haida and Katzie First Nations of North America, and I'm an artist, author, singer, and educator. My dream is to bring healing to our indigenous cultures. And it's good to remember that we're all indigenous of Mother Earth. Here is a photo of my people in Klinkwan, an original Haida village before we were forced to leave and settle in our current village of Heidelberg, Alaska around 1900. And below it is my family after assimilation. And this is a form that the US government made us sign in 1915, stating that we would no longer practice our culture. Here's a painting of my sister and I with our prayer warrior grandmother. We are grandchildren of a boarding school survivor. My grandma never talked about her experience. I started to learn what really happened in these schools, and I remember feeling so hurt because my grandma was the sweetest woman alive. How could anyone treat children this way and get away with it? Recently, I began learning that there was a practice of sterilizing indigenous women. It was a known fact that my grandma could not have babies, yet by a miracle, she became pregnant with my mom. And 2 months later, she was pregnant with my auntie. Here's a painting I did of all of their great-grandbabies. We are still here. This is another painting from my book, Lovebirds, a true story of Raven and Eagle, which is a true love story about my Haida grandparents. In the year 2000, after being married for 53 years, they actually passed away on the same day of natural causes. And I created this piece to honor that day. And that event sparked my career as an artist. I became very passionate about preserving my culture and keeping my elders' legacy alive. It's been almost 20 years and since my grandparents left this realm, and that passion still burns very strong. My activism is reclaiming what was stolen from my people. I began making regalia, writing children's books, practicing our art form, and learning and composing songs in our endangered language. And many other tribal members are also working really hard to save our language and cultural ways. The next slide is of a totem pole in Vancouver, Canada, and it was carved by a master Haida carver, James Hart, and it's called Reconciliation. And from the bottom, it tells the story of our people before colonization. In the middle there, it shows the boarding school era, and at the top is our healing, and we're coming back. And I feel like we're in that time now where we're reclaiming our culture. This is my very first art piece from my book, Killer Whale Eyes, which I later realized was a self-portrait of me breaking away from all the negativity and starting my personal path of healing from the generational trauma that was placed on my people. I began teaching the children in my community from a much-needed Indigenous perspective. Here I am teaching a formline art lesson. During these classes, I'm able to teach about sensitive subjects like cultural appropriation, and the youth have just so many clarifying questions and inspiring comments. It's just an honor to work with the youth. I work with Indigenous youth of all tribes, hoping to inspire them to carry on our languages and cultural ways using their own unique gifts. Our precious youth need many positive role models to show them the way and to remind them just how precious and needed they are. And these are photos of, the next one are photos of the Haida language classes and our recent youth cedar bark hat weaving class taught by Master Weaver. Seattle has been very generous. I was able to raise grant funds to pay for these classes, and I was able to start the Haida Roots Language and Youth Arts program for our community. So exciting. Just keeping our language and culture alive. And here I am teaching at South Shore School in the Seattle School District. I am now working with the Native Education Program to bring our Haida language in as one of the 8 Indigenous languages being offered for credit as a world language. I'm so excited. Here I am teaching the 4th grade youth at Waldorf schools, which I feel would be a great model for all schools, as the children here their emotions are met and they are given a world education, which really gives them respect for all cultures. I was just really impressed with the Waldorf schools. And this is a photo of our Seattle-based dance group, Haida Heritage, performing in our village. We had such a great trip. The kids actually put their cell phones down. Each of us felt a powerful reconnection to our lands, and I'm just so excited that our village just opened an all Haida-speaking immersion preschool, no English allowed. Here I am singing with my tribal funk band, Ku'ik, at the Paramount Theater. We opened for Death Cab for Cutie, and it was just such a powerful moment. Just singing our songs to a full house, it was just so amazing, sharing the stage with, my favorite, like Sade. And I just love this picture because the joy you see reflected in this photo reminds me of our elders, and they would get together and speak our language with each other. They would just laugh, and Regardless of the laws, we were still hiding, we still practice our cultural ways, mostly behind closed doors, but our language survived through songs that they would teach us. And this is my family at the Women's March. My hope for the future is that we as a human race will evolve, that wisdom will rise, and we will stop making the same foolish human mistakes of abusing each other to gain power. And I personally believe women will rise up and bring that much needed balance. In fact, it's already happening. In my art, I like to remember the time when my Haida people were strong and healthy. We knew no sickness because we lived in harmony with the earth. Women and men were equals. Two spirits were powerful healers and shamans. We could speak many languages. We lived in longhouses with 4 generations, which made us emotionally strong. And we lived in a way where we walked with creation every day. We live in a time now where my children and grandchildren can now it's okay to be indigenous. The healing of my people is taking place every day, and as we reach the quarter mark of the 21st century, let us all remember and learn from our past human mistakes and always treat every culture with love and acceptance. I encourage everyone to stay connected to their culture. This includes all the immigrants who came here trying to escape their past or those who were stolen from their indigenous lands. I'll leave you with this quote from Marcus Garvey. A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots.
My name is Isam, and I graduated high school with a 1.5 GPA. This is actually my first time saying that on stage. But the reason why is because I was a product of my environment. I was a product of my pain. I was a product of my trauma. And I got caught up trying to chase the American dream, like many of my other friends that I grew up with. American dreams. You know, there's this quote or a line from a famous hip-hop song. B.I.G., Biggie. Birthdays were the worst days. Now we sip champagne when we thirsty. You know, this is a perfect representation or reflection of the American dream. You see, we're constantly trying to portray this image that, yo, I came from poverty, I came from nothing, and now I'm successful, right? But what is a problem with that is that we don't hear about the journey, right? How many people actually achieve the American dream, right? So we're constantly trying to be successful. We're constantly, you know what I mean, trying to, you know what I mean, work a 9-to-5, work corporation jobs, you know, to become successful, right? And with the people in my community who don't have those resources, they turn to the streets because they don't see themselves working corporate or going to university or college like myself. I remember I used to tell myself, I'm never gonna go to college, right? So I was running around in the streets and I was participating in a lifestyle that hurt me and that hurt a lot of loved ones close to me, including my mother, right? Who used to tell me, Isam, you need to change. Like, when are you gonna change, Isam? And I didn't think I wanted to do anything else in my life besides, you know, run around and do what I was doing. I lost a lot of loved ones close to me, and it hurts. It hurts when you get that phone call unexpectedly saying that, yo, this person just got murdered. Right? And a lot of us were traumatized from a very young age, and these problems still exist to today. It was not only pre-gentrification in South Seattle, right? The end of 2017, we lost 2 loved ones in my community just 1 week apart from each other. And a lot of the times, it stems from problems like money. I know friends who murdered other friends over money, right? Over things like that, right? So it makes me think like, damn, is this what really trying to, and that's the narrative that's not talked about, right? The journey to trying to chase the American dream. How many people can actually achieve it without getting locked up or losing their life? I had the privilege to go to Cambodia in 2017, and it gave me a contrast, and it taught me, right, what I should be chasing instead of the American dream, right? I stayed in the village for a few weeks with my father who raised me, because my biological father left me before I was born. So while staying in the village, I learned about contentment, right? The people had so little, but they were so happy. Right? They didn't have money, no electricity, no Wi-Fi, but they were so happy, right? And I learned so much, and I took so much lessons for them, right? One of these lines I wrote, I met an elder, and he showed me how to listen. He's always giving gifts because his smile is a present. His speech was not excessive, wasn't scared to speak, but only spoke when asked questions. University won't teach you all the lessons, right? This is something I learned in the village. Illiterate people who can't, like my father, who can't read or write, but they have so much lessons to offer and so much that we can take from them. But within society, we're always looking down at somebody who doesn't have a college degree or who doesn't go to school. When my father right here in this picture is somebody I've learned the most from, but he doesn't have a certificate at what he does, but in reality, in his skills, is equivalent to somebody with a PhD, right? This is an Arabic word for hub, love, holding on to love in a society that teaches us self-hate, you know what I mean? And being mad at the situations that we're in, hating the fact that we're poor, hating the fact that we're not like what they portray on the TV. Like we don't got, you know what I mean, jewelry and lavish cars and, you know, things of that nature, right? And over here is just in the origin of the word charity, which comes in many forms, right? Charity is not just in giving financially, it's also in smiling, right? And being good to others. Yeah, pretty much, you know what I'm saying, what I was mentioning, if you just want to just read through it real quick. You know, I was taught to not put too many words on a PowerPoint, but I don't care. All right, so creative expression, all right? Understanding emotions through creativity. You see, my mother, she was given medicine she was allergic to in 2007, and she went into a coma. I was 13, 14 years old. I was traumatized, right? And the reason why, and not meeting my biological father even, you know what I'm saying? This is my mother right here in a recent video that I did. Because of my mother, because of what I seen her go through, it inspired me to become successful, not for the money, but for her, right? She was my main source of inspiration. So starting this creative journey has taken me to places I never thought I would be, right? This right here, I released my album last month, my debut album titled 1212, and this is an Arabic word for, that's me by the way, Alif, Mim, yeah, which is Ummi, my mother. She is a light, right, that surrounds me coming from a broken home, as you can see in the image, right? She's my main source of inspiration, right? And often we don't ask ourselves, like I know we know words, but sometimes we don't really pay attention to the definition, right? So, I mean, this is the definition of dream, you know what I mean? And sometimes I ask myself, it's like, yo, is the American dream even real? Is it true? Like, our parents, they came from, you know, like my father, he lost his wife and his 3 children, two of his children to starvation, right? They all passed away. They all died from starvation in the war back home in Cambodia. And this is my stepfather, right? But I call him my real father because he was my father figure, right? He lost his family. He had no choice but to come to this country, right? Because he had nothing. And I had a conversation last week. I had a conversation last week with, hey, what's up? I had a conversation last week with a taxi driver. I was in a wheelchair accessible van. Me and my mom was going to, you know what I'm saying, hang out. And it was an East African elder. And he told me that he sent his son back home. And why is the reason he sent his son back home? Because he was scared. He was scared that his son would end up another statistic and losing his life to the streets. And that hit me. It's like, man, our parents came from other countries to leave the conditions that they were in before, come to the United States to chase this American dream, and then now they're sending their children back home because of the reality. My father, who raised me, is 79 years old and still living in poverty. But money was not his mission. His mission was to provide, and he taught me to be content. And even with my mom, even though my mother still uses a machine to breathe, and she physically can't do anything on her own, right? The government is not giving us resources in order to provide for my mother. No, they're not giving her the physical therapy she needs and things of that nature. And that motivated me. I was like, I'm going to become successful. I'm going to become a millionaire by the time I'm 25 years old, so I could provide for my parents who went through so much, and now I'm 25 years old, and I didn't get to achieve that goal, all right? But it's cool, though, right? Because I'm past that, right? Now my main focus is self-growth, working on myself, and community organizing, right, for the youth who don't have, giving the youth opportunities that I didn't have. You know what I'm saying? Giving them a platform, you know what I'm saying? And having them deal with their trauma and their pain, and then teaching them creative expression as a tool to understand your emotions, right? So my mother used to tell me, I used to complain to my mom, I was like, yo, Mom, why are we poor for? And she used to tell me, son, we're not poor because richness is in the heart, right? And I was at that time, I was like, whatever, okay. But later on, and I reflected on it, and I was like, okay, faith is what I need in order to, you know what I mean, go through what I'm going through. So I have this piece titled Faith, I'm gonna share with y'all. And I want crowd participation if you guys are okay with that. So if y'all could repeat after me. 2, 3. 2, 3. Yeah, let's keep it at this. Now I gotta grind hard till we all straight. Me say you rich, son, if you got faith. You can't know ease if you don't know heartache. And love is so sweet if you only knew the taste. Now I gotta grind hard till we all straight. Me say you rich, son, if you got faith. You can't know ease if you don't know heartache. And love is so sweet if you only knew the taste. Yeah. Okay. Swimming against the current, trying to see the show. I was questioning my circle, I just wasn't sure. Had me giving to temptations till I wanted more. Soul infected with the sickness, searching for a cure. Time was passing in the quickness, trying to chase it though. Living little too fast, now I'm moving slow. I appreciate the present, treat it like a gift. I put my head on the mat so my faith would lift. Up like the bird soaring in the wind. I feel no worries in that moment, not a single thing. My eyes is heavy, but my chest is weightless. Yeah, I slipped up as a youth, I'm not afraid to say it. The OG showed me what patience is, I try to relay it. I'm learning from the children the essence of inspiration. What you said really don't matter with that demonstration. Still trying to reach the masses one, like Muhammad's nation. Peace be upon him, every poem is a dedication. So that my travel beacons worship, I don't take vacations. The haters talking, I don't listen, I can't let them faze me, cause only God could judge intentions. The scriptures mention every letter, every word, and every single sentence has a story like Allah's. I pray we implement them. Now I gotta grind hard till we all straight. Me say you rich, son, if you got faith. You can't know ease if you don't know heartache. And love is so sweet if you only knew the taste. Yeah. Now I gotta grind hard till we all straight. Me say you rich, son, if you got faith. You can't know ease if you don't know heartache. And love is so sweet if you only knew the taste. Yeah. Much love.
This is overwhelming, and I'm not going to cry, but I want to. So I just want to thank everybody, all you warriors. These stories are amazing, and it just gives me so much strength to be on the stage with you all and share this platform to bring these stories to light, because there's so many voices that have been repressed and silenced, and I'm here to, support you all and amplify other people's voices. So thanks for having me. I'm Kimberly Dariana. I'm Mandan and Hidatsa. Those are tribes in North Dakota.
I'm what's called a third-generation urban Indian. So I didn't grow up on my reservation. I grew up in Bozeman, Montana. This is a picture of where I grew up, and above that was an earth lodge, and that's our traditional structures of my culture. So I'm an architect, and I practice indigenous-based knowledge practices in the concept of my work. And so looking at how culturally and environmentally responsive design can build community and build villages that are for people. And one of the tactics I use as an architect is to design with community and to design, like I don't want to just be putting my ideas onto people. Like I believe that to build our villages, we need to include the users in the design. So this is an image of my philosophy for what my American dream is, and that's indigenizing urban villages for all and taking these ideas and philosophies of our cultures and infiltrating them and spreading them for cities for all people. I'm here to talk about this awesome art collective that's happening in the city of Seattle right now, Yehow, and it's a Lushootseed word that means to do the work. And this is sort of a platform that is giving us indigenous people, artists, designers, an opportunity to invigorate the city and claim our presence on this land. This is a image of Vi Hilbert, and she's a Coast Salish woman that helped keep this knowledge in this city. Part of the systems that have been helping Yehow really amplify their voice and their presence have been through partnerships like the library. The SAM is a partner, Chief Seattle Club. They've also been providing mentorship opportunities for artists. These are 2 Coast Salish women artists that are showing their work and curating shows. Everybody who applied, all the artists that applied to Yehow, their work was incorporated, and somehow there's over 200 applicants that have applied. The movement's also providing studio space, co-working sessions, satellite exhibitions, just really trying to bring awareness that we're here and that we have a lot of knowledge and a lot of sustainability practices to teach everybody and share with everybody. So the movement will kind of culminate into the opening of the arts at King Street Station, and that will be where one of the biggest exhibitions will be, and I get to participate in that. And so this is my grandmother, Corrine, brings the medicine, and then my dad and some of my mentors along that showed me the way into this architecture path. And that's where I gained my strength and figure out how to do this work, all this important work that we're doing. This is a map of the Coast Salish territories that we're on right now. And the project that I get to work on with Yehow is at King Street Station, and that was traditionally called, that's the Lushootseed spelling, but the Little Crossing Over Place. And in my work, I really like to focus on women and our roles in our societies. And I believe with this statement, when we are saying we want to be water protectors and nature protectors, if we're not protecting Indigenous women, we're not going to be able to achieve those goals. So that's what, thank you. This is the site of King Street Station, and this is the plaza area that I get to build a temporary art project installation on for the exhibition that will open in March. And I'm basing it off of this idea of a medicine wheel and the Lifting the Sky story, which united all the tribes, and they got the longest poles from their region and lifted up the sky because it was falling, and so we all had to unite together to keep it up. And then like my concept for what I want to incorporate in the plaza is a sundial medicine. So this is kind of what it's going to look like, we're hoping, and use lodgepole pines to create like this really awesome clock that kind of negates I don't know if you saw it, the tower phallic structure. And just create this womb-like medicinal way that we're connecting with time and earth and land. And this is a cedar post that came to me over Christmas break at the Airbnb we were staying at on this traditional Skokomish winter camp. And it had fallen in a storm and needed to get cleaned up, so Asia was helping me clean it up. And then this is some work I was playing around with to start to figure out what pieces we're going to use. This is my niece, Gracie, and my husband, Julius. This is at our wedding in Elmo, Montana, at the Powwow Grounds, and this is my American dream, activating our traditional structures and our spaces, and being able to represent ourselves in spaces that we see ourselves in. And so this is the Yaha women and their website, and please join us for more events and follow their website, because there's a lot of opportunities for you all to participate and learn and just join us in our healing and our regenerated.
I just want to give a shout out before I start. My son, Jonas Carter, here in the front row. He didn't get a chance to share it, but his dream was that women in the United States would have fair pay equity. He's 11 years old, and you wonder if you're a parent, right? If you're doing it right, you think most of the time you're screwing it up, and I felt all right at that moment. So, thank you. All right, last but not least, let's get into this. I hit the space bar and then away we go. Is that the deal? All right. So I think, as most of you probably know, over the past week, everyone's been running around posting their Facebook profile pictures next to their current one. What I did is hack the damn internet, went into a time machine, and came up with my MySpace photo from like 2007. Nothing to do with the theme, just suck it, Zuckerberg. That's it. Does anyone here know what it feels like to grapple with a topic as big, as wide, and as deep as the American dream? It feels a little like this. Like it's yours, the fabric and the construction are familiar, and you're like 99% confident you successfully pulled it off in the past, but when it gets stuck, it's kind of dark in there, and you're worried. So there's a general acceptance, I think really at a minimum, this night has taught us that the construct of the American dream exists, right? The construct, whether you buy into it or not, is that democracy plus freedom plus safety gives one opportunities that lead to prosperity. And the key component to that, which I think is generally bullshit, is that the path of mobility is available to you no matter where you started out in life. If you like equations, I made one up using clip art and whatnots. So here it is. The democratic rights of the Federal Republic, plus our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms, plus safety provided by, like, supposedly the military and the police, right, allow equal access to opportunity. Even if you majored, I think, in cynicism and currently drip with snark, I think you'll admit there are times and there are places where even you grapple with the notion of the American dream, where you pick it up and you weigh it, where you swish it around in your mouth before deciding how you feel about it. Beyonce, Jay-Z, that's not the American dream. The rebuttals to an idealized notion of the American dream are not difficult to uncover. Ask any of these people if their level of access to opportunity and prosperity was evenly experienced. Yet even with this type of overwhelming evidence proven again and again and again and on this stage that race, class, gender, geography, sexuality, religion, and ability disproportionately impact access to opportunity and prosperity, the construct of the American dream persists. Whether you like it or not, many of our collective memories are harbored in various constructions of the past and oftentimes the present. The digestion of complex historical experiences into collective memories causes problems as we reshape fact and reality to fit within the vessels we use to carry our own identity. So I fully acknowledge, as we move forward, the complex and problematic nature of the American dream. But I also acknowledge that the construct exists. So one question that I think warrants our time and our energy tonight is this: what is the usefulness of the American dream? To answer this question, I think we must agree that the construct of the American dream has always been inequitably conceptualized and realized, but we must also agree that it is a potently powerful ethos which much of America actively projects and faithfully protects. Like those too tight pants you just can't give up. You think they look good, but you know they really don't. So holding these two perspectives in mind simultaneously is the only way we can truly determine whether there is a utility in the American dream, whether it can be effectively understood, and more importantly, strategically weaponized for good. At which times, in which places, and towards what ends is the American dream most useful? To answer this question, I ventured to the sciences. Right here, this is a super scientific graph that I created on the back of an envelope, right? Trying to plot out the correlation between the usefulness, right, of American dream shown on the y-axis, and then the different altitudes of my life, from the me to the state, to the county, to the hemisphere, to the world. Right? So I tried basically like 3 or 4 versions of this chart before I realized like I dropped out of statistics freshman year and I went into the humanities full on. And I think for any of us, right, who work in arts and culture, you know our comfort zone is in the story, right? It's like a warm whoopee that we can't get too far away from or we start to feel awkward. So I looked for stories of people or places or instances when the construct of the American dream seemed to be 1, deeply understood, and 2, successfully utilized for a particular aim. So let's start with the NFL, right? You got young men of color. They've deployed their God-given abilities, their talents, and their innate drive to rise to the pinnacles of fame and wealth. Doesn't that maybe smell like the American dream? And now I want you to consider how pissed off so many folks are, mostly white folks, that they don't just shut up and play the game. There's an outrage that these young men are turning their backs on the American dream. But think about how effective, right? How effective that dissonance-driven anger has been in forcing a conversation about police brutality and about racial injustice. Another story I want to put forth of effective utilization of the American dream was the media's coverage of Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy, which separated children from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border and continues to this day, indicated by this photos and series of other photos. I think that the media and immigrant rights group realized that Americans really don't give a damn about adults not having the opportunity to realize the American dream. Because as the American dream equation suggests, the inability to benefit from that dream is really your own fault. But you take that dream, that opportunity of that dream away from little kids, can't take it. And that's a much more effective protest strategy. Next, Miss Maxine Waters. The 5th of 13 children worked her way up from a garment factory all the way to Congress. And in 2007, at this committee meeting, she said what? I'm reclaiming my time. Right? She's bending the promise of the American dream towards her role as protector, right, of a critical element of that construct, and that's our representational democracy. But I also got to admit there are problematic utilizations of the American dream. Trump was aware of the narrative power of the American success story and played on a populist ideals that undergird the American dream. And in my opinion, this caused the electorate to not necessarily weigh and evaluate him correctly, and damn it, look where we are. Lastly, I just want to say understanding the American dream as a powerful construct is interesting, but understanding how to manipulate this country's commitment to its maintenance is so much more important. That is its true usefulness. So think about this, that last photo, right? You have the ability to take a site of liberation and damn near sit it on the head of a monument to a slave owner. And I think that's how you utilize the American dream.